right. Hello, everybody. This is Matt Orozco from Macabre Daily here, and I am so excited to be joined by Kate Patel, who is one of the stars of the upcoming, I don't know, slasher, horror, true kind of thriller, Scalper, that's coming out next Tuesday, January 16th. Kate, so much thanks for being with us.
Yes, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Well, I'll get right into the questions, Kate. I know you've done quite a bit of work before in the past in the genre with Light Visions and Pig Killer, so really excited to see you make another return with Scalper. How did you approach preparing for the role of Detective Lupino?
It's interesting because it's Detective Ida Lupino who, when I looked her up, she was an actual person and an actress. And so I had an interesting concept of that going into the film. I thought it was neat that Chad had arranged it that way. Um, in terms of the role of detective, I can't say I've seen too many detective films or TV shows, but I sort of, I guess, took on a inquisitive and somewhat a hardened manner to my character. I know Jake was playing my partner, detective, and he, the good cop, bad cop. So I was sort of the bad cop, and he's sort of the good cop. So there was that dynamic that I was honing in on for the work in my role.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, it's quite a layered role, right? Because you have the components of being not just the detective on the case, but also some previous history to the previous killer. So it is, in fact, I didn't know even going into this that this was a sequel to a film that Chad did before, Nightcaller, but I started to figure that out towards the end. So I definitely saw a lot of nuance in how you brought some of that bad cop to the role. Um, Given you worked with Chad before in the past, on Pig Killer, how, if at all, did this experience differ from that one, and how did you two get together in the first place?
Oh, wow, those are great questions. First of all, maybe I'll start with how we met. A good friend of mine and producer and casting director, Jeff Olin, I'd gone to him with this idea for a movie about Willie Pickton, who was a serial killer in Canada. And I was living there. And I sort of had this idea of his story interwoven with the story of this girl who falls for all the wrong people. And then, upon their meeting, it sort of it changes things. And that, I sort of had this concept in my mind. And so I went to Jeff with that idea, and he said, "Oh, well, I know someone who writes and directs and produces, and he's a one-man show." I was like, "Oh, great!" So we all met up at a Chinese restaurant in Los Feliz, and I said, "Let's do it. Let's make this film." And uh, so it's sort of that's how it started, and it was very different from my experience than making the Scalper, because with the Pig Killer, I was sort of involved in the idea from the beginning. I was in the film, I was acting in the film, and I was producing. So I had all of these roles, so to speak, that I was um, playing in the Pig Killer. Versus the Scalper, it was, simply acting. Um, so very different dynamic. I learned so much, like with the Pig Killer, just in terms of I loved the role. I loved being able to get deep into a role like that, and just a lot of behind the scenes logistics and dynamics. It was my first time experiencing any of that, and I really I learned so much in that aspect too. So
Do you think you'll go
yeah.
back to producing again at some point, or?
Oof. Maybe. It's not a focus at the moment, but maybe, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, it seemed we talked with a lot of folks that, start in one area and then eventually production kind of creeps up. So it's interesting to see you kind of start with production, and then want to go out from there. So, um,
Yeah. But I think it's very helpful and valuable, getting into the industry, um, as I am sort of um in that arena. Very helpful to see all of the pieces that go into making a film versus just, getting there and acting, which is wonderful. And that's something I love to do. But it's also very helpful to see all the dynamics that go on behind that, in terms of knowledge and yeah, so.
yeah, it's you kind of get the best of both in front of them and behind the camera when you're doing that double duty, but I'm sure it's quite taxing. So having never produced or acted myself, I can't say from my perspective.
I don't know. There's so much, and I had Jeff helped me so much, sort of, took me under his wing, for this one. He's a producer on the film, so I wouldn't have been able to do it without him. I would feel like a fish out of water for sure. But it's helpful, sort of being guided through, and yeah. So.
Excellent. Well, in regards to kind of what was most challenging or rewarding for this particular role, what was something that you experienced either during production or even post that was the most challenging? And then ultimately, what was the most rewarding process for you making Scalper?
Mm. I guess the most challenging aspect for a scalper, um, would have been, I look back on that role, and I think, there's certain scenes that I'm like, oh man, I wish I'd have done this, or maybe reworked some of my approach, and how I did a scene. And that sort of, I didn't necessarily feel that with the pig killer. But for some reason with the scalper, I almost wish I could do it again. And maybe that's just me sort of overthinking things, but um, that was challenging. I didn't feel completely satisfied with my um, self as an actress in that film. Uh, I'd say that was probably the most challenging aspect of that. Um, and the most rewarding aspect, I'd say, would be I just love the camaraderie that this group has. A lot of the same people
Yeah.
that were in Pig Killer are also in Scalper, and Chad does a lot of his films, with the same people, and it's sort of like this, you know, uh, strange horror film family that gets together and does these films, and that is I just find so rewarding, being around that camaraderie. We're all sort of in it together, and we experience the challenges and the successes and all of it together. And it's sort of like to be working with the same people in a completely different role is fun. I find it really fun. And I think that's pretty special. I don't think that happens all of the time, where you have sort of the same group of people in so many films. And I think that's the most rewarding aspect. Chad's a fantastic director to work with. Um, he's efficient, but he's very easygoing, and in many ways, which leaves it open for this creative element to kind of emerge, and the, ideas that, I'm like, hey, what about if we try this? He's like, sure. It's just, it's cool. It's kind of a rogue way of doing things in some aspects, which I appreciate
It's a lot
for
of
that.
trust, right? I think Chad has worked with a lot of, Robert Miano has been in a lot of his films, Biling. And so I know that when you have the people that you've worked with before, you can cultivate a great amount of trust. And I think that that bleeds into anybody else that's coming into the fold, is that you kind of inherit that trust that that group already has.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with that. There was that trust definitely for me going into the Scalper, and working with Jake. It was cool because Jake and I had a certain dynamic in the Pig Killer, and then in the Scalper it's this different dynamic, but we still have this connection to go off of, and it was cool. It is very neat to experience uh the same people in different dynamics and roles. It can be a lot of fun. So
Yeah, I mean, it's even a challenge in of itself, right? Is how do I separate my character from the one I just played in this around the same kind of cast of actors, but totally different characters, different motivations, etc. So I think that,
yeah.
again, having watched, both Pig Killer and Scalper, I think that there certainly is a talent that goes into being able to change your persona, even though you're working with the same people. So hats off to you all for being able to effectively maneuver, that kind of theater troupe environment where you're the same people but just doing different parts all the time.
Yeah, yeah, thanks for that. I think that's one of the joys, the great joys of acting for me, is being able to do these totally different personas, and what's that like, and it's fun. It's fun.
Yeah, it's like make believe for adults, but you hopefully are getting a paycheck out of it, right? That's the best part about it. So,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
um, last couple questions for you, Kate. The first one is kind of, would you consider yourself a fan of horror films, in general? And if so, which ones are your favorites?
Ooh, I, I'll be frank. I'm not a huge horror movie fan. I used to enjoy sort of dark psychological uh, movies. Some of them, I guess, could be considered horror movies. I'm more of a psychological thriller person in terms of what I like. And I was really drawn to Alfred Hitchcock growing up. He was a huge influence in my life. Um, but that's not really horror genre. I'm. It is a little difficult for me to see some of the explicit gore, um, which is interesting, because I've done these two horror films, but um, looking behind the scenes at the excuse me, Joe Castro, who does the special effects and all of that, watching him, make these special effects and props, and these bloody limbs and all of that, and the passion that he has for that put a different spin on things for me. I sort of had a deepened respect for, it's not just about what's seen on the screen. Now I'm questioning, oh, what went behind that, and all the, he just gets so excited about finding the right amount of shine in the blood, and like, it's just, that was neat, because I got a different perspective on horror films, in that sense, and what goes into making them, and just the the warmth and the positive energy that everyone had behind these films, even though they're pretty horrific. That was neat for me to see. Because you can watch a horror film and it's pretty terrifying, but then think about, oh, what are they hanging out behind the scenes sort of a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's often been said that people in the horror genre, particularly the filmmakers and the folks who are fans, tend to be more nice than they seem, just because you assume that kind of this, oh, they must be some kind of dark, eerie, gothic folks, but instead they're kind of a little bit more bubbly and happier than you'd imagine. So it's pretty quite a juxtaposition.
Yes, that it's so true. You know, so some of the the sweetest like personalities, and just, you know, loving what they do, you know, as well. And that really made it such a rewarding experience as well.
Feeding
Yeah.
off that energy of just people enjoying what they do feeds into your work as well, I would imagine. So the last question I have for you, Kate, is, what if any upcoming projects do you have that you're able to share with us?
Yeah, well, right now I'm sort of involved quite a bit at the Actors Studio, working on stuff and going to sessions there, which is more of a, it's not a public thing, but that's, you know, it's important for me and very valuable for me. So I'm working on, you know, my audition for there, and, you know, again, this isn't for the public, but it's something that's very important to me. So you know, I spend a lot of time with that, and that's a big focus for me. Um, I'm shooting something at the end of this month, a short independent film. Um, and I'm also working on a documentary of my own right now that has nothing to do with horror films at all. It's quite the opposite. So um, yeah, those are some of the things that I have going on right now. I've got a pretty uh, full plate for the next couple months in terms of all that. So
Well, that's
yeah.
great to
But,
hear,
but
given the strike from last year, that you got a full plate of stuff this year.
yeah,
That's
yeah. I mean,
fantastic.
I'm looking forward to doing more films. I did a couple of plays this past year in 2023, which was great. You know, to be able to do theater, and I'm realizing, you know, as much as I love that, I miss making films. So I'm looking forward to this one coming up at the end of the month, and more, you know, more to come this year. So
Well, that's fantastic, Kate. And we wish you the best of luck on your audition for the Actor Studio. That's a huge achievement and milestone. So we're all rooting for you. And I want to thank you again for your time in this conversation. It's been really great to have a chat with you and kind of hear about your experience working on Scalper. And for those that, didn't catch it at the beginning, Scalper is going to be out on VOD next week, or when we're filming this. So that's Tuesday, the 16th of January. Make sure to go and check it out. And Kate, thank you so much for your time, and look forward to seeing you in more films in the future.
thank you so much.